The CEO needed a fake fiancé to end a rumor, but didn't expect the quiet girl to become the center of the room. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin with today's story. Liam Parker, a billionaire CEO, stood at the window of his penthouse, his eyes scanning the skyline of New York City. He had it all: wealth, power, success. Yet there was one thing he lacked: peace of mind. The rumors swirling around his personal life had taken a toll on his business. Whispers about his relationships, or lack thereof, were spreading faster than wildfire. It was getting out of control. He needed a solution, and fast. Then, a thought crossed his mind. A fake fiancé. It sounded simple enough, a temporary solution to end the speculation. But finding the right person for the job wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. As the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the world, Liam was no stranger to making tough decisions. But this one was different. He couldn't risk choosing just anyone. They needed to be believable. Not too flashy, not too outgoing, someone who could blend in. That's when he noticed her. Emma Brooks, a quiet, introverted woman who had worked at his company for over a year. She kept to herself, always polite, but never drawing attention. She was perfect. At least, that's what he thought when he first approached her. He couldn't help but notice how her eyes always seemed to avoid direct contact. Her small, shy smile always accompanied by a nervous glance around the room. She had a certain aura of vulnerability, which made her seem trustworthy. Liam couldn't remember the exact moment when the idea of asking her to play his fake fiancé started forming, but by the time he was standing in front of her office, the decision felt inevitable. It was a risk, but one he had to take. He knocked on the door softly, his heart beating a little faster than usual. "Emma?" he asked, stepping inside. She looked up from her desk, her wide eyes locking with his. "Yes, Mr. Parker," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need your help," he began, his tone serious but not unkind. "I have a situation, and I think you're the perfect person for the job. It won't be anything permanent, just a temporary arrangement to help me with a few rumors. I need a fake fiancé." Emma froze, her mind racing. Fake fiancé? This was ridiculous. She had never been the center of attention, and now she was being asked to play the role of the perfect woman in front of the entire city? Her mind immediately went to all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. I don't think I can," she stammered, her words falling short. But before she could say anything more, Liam raised his hand, interrupting her. "Emma, I know this is sudden, but it's a simple arrangement. There's no real commitment involved. It's just for show, and I'll make sure you're compensated well for your time. It's the easiest job you'll ever do," he said, his voice calm and persuasive. Emma stared at him, unsure of what to say. This wasn't her world. She had never been the type to make waves or draw attention to herself. But the offer was tempting. She could use the money, and the idea of doing something so bold was both terrifying and thrilling. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "I'll do it, but I need to be clear. This is just a job. Nothing more," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous energy swirling inside her. Liam nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Of course," he said, his eyes glinting with approval. "Thank you, Emma. You won't regret this." As the deal was struck, neither of them could have anticipated how much their lives were about to change. Emma had no idea that this seemingly simple arrangement would lead her into the center of attention in ways she could never have imagined. And Liam had no idea that the quiet, unassuming woman he had chosen would turn out to be far more than just a stand-in for his reputation. As the days passed, Emma found herself caught in the whirlwind of her new role. It felt surreal, walking through the lavish halls of Liam's company, knowing she was there to play a part in a life so different from her own. The glitz and glamour were overwhelming, but there was also something strangely exhilarating about it. It was as if she was stepping into a world she had always admired from a distance, but never thought she'd be a part of. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing dress-up in a world where she didn't belong, and yet, there was a strange sense of freedom in it. For once, she didn't have to worry about her finances or the constant struggle to make ends meet. She could breathe, even if it was just for a little while. Liam, on the other hand, was starting to notice something about Emma that he hadn't expected. Sure, she was quiet, introverted, and a little awkward in social settings, but there was a sincerity about her that was impossible to ignore. He had expected to hire someone who would just blend into the background, someone who would play her part and leave the room as soon as the job was done. But Emma wasn't like that. She had this quiet strength about her, an authenticity that made people pay attention. At the company's event, she was introduced as his fiancé, and while she had practiced the role, she hadn't fully understood how to navigate this new version of herself. But when she spoke, even in the simplest way, people listened. It wasn't because she was trying to be anything more than what she was. It was because she was genuine. The contrast between her and the other women at the event, all polished and rehearsed, made Emma stand out even more. Liam watched as she interacted with everyone, her nervousness fading with each new conversation. She wasn't perfect, but in that imperfection, she was captivating. Emma could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, but instead of shrinking away, she embraced the attention in a way that surprised herself. For the first time, she felt like she was enough. And Liam noticed. As the night went on, he found himself more and more intrigued by her. She wasn't just playing a role, she was becoming a part of something, of him. When the evening came to a close, he found himself reluctant to let her go. "You did well tonight," Liam said, his voice a little softer than usual. Emma smiled, her heart racing from the night's events. "Thanks. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be." There was a pause, and Liam looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You're different from what I expected," he said, almost to himself. Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I'm just being myself," she replied, the truth of it settling in her heart. She had no idea what Liam truly thought of her, but in that moment, she didn't need to know. The validation from the people in the room had been enough. And yet, as she walked out of the venue beside him, she couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had changed. It wasn't just the job anymore. This wasn't just a fake engagement. It was starting to feel real. The next day, Emma was back in her apartment, sitting at her small desk, still processing everything that had happened. She couldn't believe how quickly things had escalated. One minute, she was a waitress struggling to make ends meet, and now, she was playing the part of a millionaire's fiancé at a glamorous event. She glanced at the sketchbook on her desk, her mind drifting to the art she loved, the one thing that had always brought her peace. She had promised herself she would focus on that again, but right now, she couldn't stop thinking about Liam. There was something about him that was different from the other powerful men she'd met. He wasn't cold or distant. He had a certain vulnerability that made her want to know more. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the way Emma had stood out in the crowd, her soft voice and gentle presence capturing the attention of everyone around her. She wasn't like the women he usually interacted with, who had their own agendas and knew how to manipulate situations for their own gain. Emma didn't have an agenda. She was real, and that made him question everything. What started as a simple arrangement, a solution to end the rumors, had turned into something much more complex. He had to admit, he was starting to care about her. He didn't know what that meant, or what would come of it, but one thing was clear, he wanted to spend more time with her. As the days went by, Liam and Emma continued their charade, but the line between fake and real began to blur. Emma's role as his fiancée grew more convincing, not just for the public, but for them. And despite her initial reservations, Emma couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this than just an act. She hadn't expected to feel this way, but the more time she spent with Liam, the more she realized that maybe she wasn't just pretending to be his fiancée. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to fall for him. As the days went by, Emma couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in her own feelings. What had started as a simple arrangement, a way to end the rumors surrounding Liam, had become something far more complicated. She tried to remind herself that this was just a job, that she was still playing a role. But every time she saw Liam, her heart beat a little faster. Every time they exchanged a glance, a smile, or shared a quiet conversation, something inside her stirred. She hadn't expected this to happen. She hadn't expected to feel anything more than a mild sense of gratitude for the opportunity he had given her. But now, as she stood by his side at yet another high-profile event, something was different. She was starting to care. Liam, too, felt the shift. At first, it had been about ending the rumors, putting on a show for the public, and getting the media off his back. But as the days passed, he found himself looking forward to their moments together. Emma wasn't just his fiancée on paper anymore. She was real. She was genuine. And in a world full of fake smiles and ulterior motives, her authenticity was a breath of fresh air. He found himself wanting to know more about her, not just the woman he had hired to play a role, but the person behind the quiet, reserved exterior. One night, after a long day of meetings and press appearances, Liam found himself walking back to his penthouse, his thoughts consumed with Emma. He had noticed how, despite her initial nerves, she was starting to shine in front of the public. People were drawn to her, not because of her beauty or her charm, but because of something deeper. She was relatable. She was real. And that was something Liam hadn't encountered in a long time. As he walked into his apartment, he was greeted by the sound of his phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. It was a text message from Emma. "Do you want to grab dinner tonight? I know a place nearby." He stared at the message for a moment, his heart skipping a beat. A dinner with Emma. It wasn't part of the plan, but the thought of spending time with her outside of their fake engagement felt strangely exciting. He quickly typed a reply, agreeing to meet her. Later that evening, they sat across from each other at a small, cozy restaurant tucked away from the city's hustle and bustle. The low hum of conversation filled the air, and the soft clink of glasses and silverware was the only sound that surrounded them. Emma looked at him, her eyes nervous but kind. "I thought we could get away from all the cameras for a bit," she said, her voice soft. "Just have a normal dinner, you know?" Liam smiled, feeling the tension in his chest ease. "I like the sound of that," he said, his tone genuine. As they talked, Emma began to open up in ways she hadn't before. She talked about her childhood, her dreams of becoming a successful artist, and how she had always felt like an outsider in her own life. "I never really fit in anywhere," she admitted. "I've always been the quiet one, the one who observes rather than participates." Liam listened intently, his gaze never leaving her face. He was fascinated by her, by the way she saw the world, and the way she spoke about it with such honesty. "You don't have to be loud to make an impact," he said softly. "Sometimes, the most powerful people are the ones who speak the least." Emma looked at him, surprised by his words. She hadn't expected him to understand. "I've never thought of it that way," she said, her voice thoughtful. As the night went on, Liam found himself more and more captivated by her. She wasn't just the woman he had hired for a job anymore. She was someone he wanted to get to know, someone who made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. But as much as he tried to push those feelings aside, he knew that it wasn't going to be easy. He was a businessman, a man who had built his empire on logic and strategy. He didn't have time for emotions, especially not when they were getting in the way of his carefully laid plans. But Emma, she was different. She wasn't like the others, and that made him question everything. The evening ended with a quiet walk back to their respective apartments. As they reached the entrance to her building, Emma turned to him, a small smile on her face. "Thanks for dinner," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I didn't expect it to be so nice." Liam smiled back, his heart pounding in his chest. "Anytime," he said, his voice low and sincere. As he watched her walk inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. It wasn't just the fake engagement anymore. This was real, and whether he liked it or not, he was beginning to care. The next morning, Emma woke up with a sense of unease in her chest. She had tried to push aside the feelings that had begun to surface over the past few days, but they wouldn't go away. She had started to fall for Liam, and that was a dangerous thing. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what that meant. But one thing was clear, she couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't keep hiding behind the role she had been playing. Something had changed, and she didn't know how to stop it. And as much as she tried to convince herself that this was just part of the act, deep down, she knew that it wasn't. Liam was no longer just her employer. He was someone she was starting to care about. And that scared her. The next few weeks passed in a blur of gala events, charity functions, and high-profile meetings, all under the careful watch of the public eye. What had started as a simple arrangement between Emma and Liam was growing increasingly complicated. Despite their agreement, neither of them could deny the growing connection between them. Emma had never been one to crave attention, but somehow, when she stood beside Liam, she felt a strange sense of purpose. She wasn't just playing a part anymore. She was becoming someone. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't pretending to be someone else. Liam, too, was beginning to see Emma in a new light. At first, he had hired her for convenience, to end the rumors and maintain his image. But as time passed, he realized that the woman standing beside him wasn't just an actress in a role she was playing. She was real. She was intelligent, kind, and remarkably perceptive. She saw through the walls he had carefully constructed around himself. And that scared him. At one of the company's charity events, Liam found himself unusually nervous. The press had been hounding him about his personal life, and he had never been good at pretending. But with Emma by his side, he felt an unexpected sense of calm. As they walked into the event together, he couldn't help but notice how people looked at her. She wasn't just the quiet, shy woman he had hired to play his fiancé. She was the center of attention. Her sincerity, her ability to connect with others without trying, had an undeniable charm. She wasn't the type of woman to flaunt her wealth or status, yet people were drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. He saw it when she spoke with the event's organizers, listened intently as they discussed their charitable efforts, and when she smiled and laughed with the guests. She had this natural way of making people feel seen, of making them feel important. And for the first time, Liam realized that it wasn't just the room that had shifted, it was him. As the night went on, Liam began to feel a mix of admiration and confusion. He had hired Emma for a job, but somewhere along the way, it had become something more. She was no longer just a tool to solve his problems. She was someone he cared about. He couldn't deny the way he felt when they shared a quiet moment together, or how her presence seemed to ease the tension he had been carrying for so long. But Emma wasn't the only one who felt the tension of their growing connection. As they stood at the center of the event, a guest approached them, offering congratulations on their engagement. The woman looked at Emma with a knowing smile. "You two make a beautiful couple," she said. The words hit Emma harder than she had expected. She knew this was all a facade, but for a moment, the line between the fake engagement and reality felt too blurred to ignore. She gave a small smile, unsure of what to say. Liam, sensing her discomfort, quickly stepped in. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes flickering with something Emma couldn't quite place. As the night wore on, the sense of unease lingered. Emma excused herself and stepped out onto the balcony for some air. The city lights twinkled below, and the cool night air helped clear her mind. She leaned against the railing, taking a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. This wasn't supposed to be real. This was just a job. But the feelings she had for Liam were undeniable, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could pretend. "You okay?" Liam's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to find him standing behind her, his expression unreadable. "I just need some space to think," she said softly. He stepped closer, his gaze softening. "I know this wasn't what either of us expected, but I need you to know that I appreciate everything you've done for me, and I've started to see you in a way I didn't before. It's not just about the engagement anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to believe him, but the reality of their situation was too complicated. "I know," she whispered. "But what does it all mean? We're still pretending, Liam. This isn't real." Liam reached out, his hand brushing hers in a gesture that felt more intimate than it should have. "What if it could be?" he asked, his voice low. Emma met his gaze, her mind racing. What if it could be? What if this wasn't just a temporary arrangement, a means to an end? What if, somehow, there was something real between them? She didn't know the answer, and for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted to. As the night came to a close and the event wound down, Liam and Emma shared a quiet drive back to her apartment. The car was filled with an unspoken tension, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Emma couldn't help but replay the conversation in her mind. Was it possible that Liam felt the same way she did? Or was he just caught up in the moment, the thrill of the charade they were playing? She didn't have an answer, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't keep pretending forever. The following day, Emma found herself standing in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress for another event. But today, something felt different. She wasn't just dressing for a role anymore. She wasn't just playing the part of a fake fiancé. She was dressing for herself. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't sure where the role ended and where she began. As the days passed, the tension between Emma and Liam continued to grow, quietly simmering beneath the surface. Emma had always prided herself on her ability to keep a cool head, to distance herself from the chaos of the world around her. But lately, she found herself distracted, her thoughts often wandering back to Liam. She couldn't deny it any longer. The lines between what was real and what was fake were blurring in ways she hadn't expected. Liam had become more than just her employer, more than just the man she was pretending to be engaged to. He had become someone she cared for, someone she couldn't stop thinking about. But as much as she tried to convince herself that it was just a temporary arrangement, the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Liam, too, was feeling the weight of their growing connection. He had hired Emma for a purpose, to be his fake fiancé and put an end to the rumors surrounding his personal life. But with each passing day, he found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't anticipated. She wasn't like the other women he had known, those who saw him as a means to an end, a ticket to wealth and power. Emma didn't care about his money or his status. She saw him for who he was, vulnerable, real, and surprisingly kind. He hadn't expected to feel anything for her, but as the days wore on, he realized that he couldn't stop thinking about her either. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Liam invited Emma to dinner at his apartment. It wasn't part of the plan. They had agreed to keep things professional, to maintain the facade of the fake engagement. But something in him couldn't resist. He wanted to see her, to talk to her without the pressure of the public. When Emma arrived, she was surprised to see that Liam had arranged a simple, intimate setting. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet dinner for two. She had grown accustomed to the lavish events, the glamorous parties, but this was different. There was something personal about it, something real. They sat across from each other at the table, the soft light from the candles flickering between them. The conversation was easy at first, casual, just like any other dinner with a colleague. But as the night wore on, something shifted. They began to talk more freely, sharing bits of themselves that they hadn't before. Emma told him about her childhood, about the art she had always dreamed of pursuing but never had the chance to. She spoke about the hardships she had faced, the sacrifices she had made, and the loneliness that had often felt like a constant companion. Liam listened, his gaze steady and attentive. For the first time, he realized just how much Emma had sacrificed to get where she was. She wasn't just some quiet girl playing a part. She was strong, resilient, and capable of so much more than she gave herself credit for. As Emma spoke, she could feel the walls she had built around herself starting to crumble. She had always kept people at a distance, afraid of being hurt, afraid of getting too close. But with Liam, something was different. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't asking for anything from her. He was just listening. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could be herself. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where they sat on the couch in comfortable silence. Liam looked at her, his expression softening. "I didn't expect you to be like this," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Emma asked, unsure of what he meant. "I thought you were just the quiet girl. The one who wouldn't make any waves," he admitted. "But you're so much more than that. He paused, searching for the right words. "You're real. And that's something I don't find often." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had always thought of herself as ordinary, unremarkable, but hearing him say that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. There was a moment of silence before Liam spoke again. "I'm not good at this," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of vulnerability. "I'm not good at letting people in. But with you, it's different. I can't explain it." Emma turned to him, her heart racing. "I don't know what's happening between us," she said softly, "but I can't pretend it's just a job anymore." Liam's gaze softened, his hand finding hers on the couch. "It's not just a job for me either," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I don't want it to be just a job. I want more." The words hung in the air between them, charged with a quiet intensity. Emma didn't know what to say. She had never been one to take risks, to let herself fall for someone, especially not someone like Liam. But in that moment, she realized that she didn't want to hold back anymore. She didn't want to be afraid of the unknown, afraid of the feelings she was beginning to acknowledge. They sat there for a long time, just holding hands, neither of them saying a word, but both of them knowing that something had changed. The fake engagement, the charade they had been playing, had suddenly become something more. And neither of them was sure where it would lead, but for the first time, they were both willing to find out. The next day, as Emma went about her routine, she couldn't shake the thoughts of Liam from her mind. She wasn't sure what had changed, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just playing a role. She was living it. And she wasn't sure what would happen next. But for the first time, she was ready to find out. As the days passed, the shift between Emma and Liam became even more undeniable. The lines between their fake engagement and real emotions had blurred, and neither of them knew how to navigate this new territory. Emma could no longer convince herself that this was all just for show. She had begun to feel something for Liam, something deep and real, and that terrified her. It was one thing to play the role of his fiancé for the public, but it was another to acknowledge the feelings that were growing inside her. She had always prided herself on keeping her emotions in check, on not letting anyone get too close. But with Liam, she couldn't help herself. And Liam, too, was starting to realize that he had underestimated just how much Emma had affected him. At first, he had hired her for a practical purpose, to end the rumors surrounding his personal life. But somewhere along the way, he had begun to see her as more than just a stand-in for a fiancé. She was smart, compassionate, and surprisingly brave. She had come into his life when he least expected it, and now, he couldn't imagine it without her. Despite the growing feelings between them, the reality of their situation hung over them both. They had agreed to this arrangement for a reason, to protect his image, to avoid the constant press scrutiny. They couldn't afford to let their emotions get in the way. Yet, when they were together, all of that seemed irrelevant. One evening, after another exhausting day of work and public appearances, Liam found himself walking through the city streets, his thoughts consumed by Emma. He hadn't planned on seeing her that night, but something in him told him he needed to. As if on cue, he received a message from her. "I need to talk," it read. Liam's heart raced. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. He quickly typed back, "I'll be there in 10 minutes. When he arrived at her apartment, Emma was waiting by the door, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. "Liam, we need to talk about this," she said as soon as she saw him. The urgency in her voice made his chest tighten. "About what?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "About us," she replied. "This isn't just a job for me anymore, Liam. I can't pretend it is. I care about you. And I think you feel the same way, but we can't keep living this lie." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been trying to push aside his own feelings, to convince himself that this was just a temporary arrangement. But Emma was right. It wasn't just a job anymore. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. He took a step closer to her, his eyes locking with hers. "I do feel the same way," he said quietly. "But what does that mean for us? What do we do now?" Emma shook her head, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know. I just know that I can't keep pretending. I don't want to be a part of some facade anymore." Liam reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "We don't have to pretend anymore," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I don't want to lose you, Emma." The words hung in the air between them, charged with the weight of everything they had been avoiding. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, looking at each other, the silence between them thick with unspoken emotions. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "I don't know how we move forward from here," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I don't want to lose you either." Liam smiled, his heart swelling with something he hadn't expected. "We'll figure it out. Together." As they stood there, in the quiet of her apartment, Emma realized that this wasn't just a chapter in her life. It was the beginning of something new. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what the future held. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She wanted to see where this new path would take her. The next day, as they went about their usual routines, Emma couldn't shake the sense of clarity that had come from their conversation. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. She wasn't just pretending to be Liam's fiancé for the sake of a rumor. She was a part of his life, and he was a part of hers. And that realization, no matter how complicated it made things, felt like freedom. Liam, too, was beginning to understand just how much Emma meant to him. It wasn't just about what she had brought to his life, though that was significant. It was about her. Her quiet strength, her unwavering sincerity, the way she made him feel seen in a world that often felt like a facade. He didn't know what the future would hold for them, but he knew that he didn't want to face it without her. The next public event they attended together was different. They no longer had to hide behind the pretense of a fake engagement. They were still navigating their feelings, still unsure of what the next step would be, but they no longer had to pretend for the world. And as they stood side by side, the whispers and rumors no longer held the same weight. This was real. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days after their conversation felt different for both Emma and Liam. There was a sense of openness between them now, a mutual understanding that hadn't been there before. They weren't just pretending anymore. They had crossed a line, and neither of them could go back to how things were before. Emma felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had been carrying the burden of pretending for so long, and now, for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. She had no idea where this would go, but she knew one thing. She wanted to see it through. She wanted to see what happened between her and Liam without the pretense of a fake engagement. As they spent more time together, Emma began to notice little things about Liam that she hadn't before. The way he would smile when he thought no one was watching. The way his eyes softened when he talked about his past, about the struggles he had faced to get where he was. He wasn't just the powerful, successful CEO that everyone saw in the public eye. He was human, and that made Emma feel even more connected to him. Liam, too, was beginning to see a side of Emma he hadn't expected. She wasn't just the shy, quiet woman he had hired for a temporary arrangement. She was strong, independent, and more than capable of holding her own. He had always admired her intelligence, but now he saw the depth of her character. He admired how she carried herself, how she stayed true to herself in a world that often demanded conformity. The more time they spent together, the more Liam realized that his feelings for Emma had deepened in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had never planned on falling for her. In fact, he had done everything he could to avoid it. But now, it was impossible to ignore. He wanted her in his life, and not just as a fake fiancé. He wanted her as his partner, his equal. But there was one thing that still held him back: the public. He had built his empire with careful strategy, and his reputation was everything. If anyone found out that his feelings for Emma were real, it could destroy everything he had worked for. He couldn't let that happen. And yet, every time he looked at her, he knew that he didn't want to let her go. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Liam invited Emma to dinner at his favorite restaurant. He had been thinking about her all day, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something had to change. They couldn't keep going on like this, living in two separate worlds. They had to take the next step, even if it meant facing the consequences. As they sat across from each other at the table, Emma could tell that something was different. Liam was quieter than usual, his usual confidence replaced by a look of contemplation. She didn't know what was going on in his mind, but she could feel the tension building between them. "Liam, what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, before he finally spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about this," he said slowly, his voice low. "About us." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I don't want this to be just a fake engagement anymore," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "I don't want to keep pretending. I've started to care about you, Emma, more than I ever thought I would, and I don't want to lose you." Emma felt a rush of emotions flood through her. She had known that something was happening between them, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way she hadn't expected. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She didn't know what to say. She had been so focused on keeping her distance, on protecting herself from getting hurt, that she hadn't allowed herself to fully acknowledge the feelings that had been growing inside her. But now, as she sat across from Liam, she realized that she couldn't ignore it anymore. "I feel the same way," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been fighting it, but I care about you too, more than I should." Liam reached across the table, his hand finding hers. "Then let's stop fighting it," he said, his voice full of determination. "Let's take this for what it is. Let's see where it goes." Emma smiled, her heart racing as she squeezed his hand. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to take the leap with him. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Liam and Emma began to navigate this new chapter of their relationship, one where they didn't have to hide behind the charade of a fake engagement. It wasn't easy. There were still the pressures of their public image, the expectations of the people around them. But for the first time, they weren't pretending. They were just two people, figuring things out together. As they spent more time together, the world around them seemed to fade away. They weren't worried about what others thought or what the future might hold. They were focused on each other. And in that moment, Emma realized that, despite the challenges they faced, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. With him, the man who had started as a stranger, then became her employer, and now, someone she couldn't imagine her life without. The uncertainty of the future still lingered, but one thing was clear: Emma and Liam were no longer just playing a role. They had found something real, something worth fighting for. The days following their conversation felt like a shift, not just in their relationship, but in their lives. The weight of what they had both admitted, the vulnerability they had shown each other, had created something real between them. No longer were they just two people playing a part for the sake of public appearances. They were more than that now. And yet, even with the understanding that things were changing between them, the fear of what that meant still lingered. For Emma, it was the fear of what would happen if the world found out. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight. She had always been a quiet observer, someone who preferred to stay out of the limelight. But now, standing beside Liam, she couldn't escape it. And there was still the nagging voice in the back of her mind, telling her that this was all too good to be true. Could it really work? Was it possible to have a real relationship with someone like him? And for Liam, the fear was just as real. He had spent so much of his life building his empire, focusing on his work and his public persona, that he hadn't allowed himself the space to truly connect with someone. But Emma had broken through those walls. She had made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just someone he had hired to be his fake fiancé. She was someone he cared about deeply, and that scared him more than anything else. They were at a crossroads. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they both knew they didn't want to go back to pretending. They wanted to move forward, to see where this thing between them could go. But it wasn't going to be easy. One evening, as the two of them sat together in Liam's penthouse, there was a moment of quiet. The weight of the world seemed to fall on them as they sat there, unsure of how to move forward. It had been a whirlwind since their conversation about not pretending anymore. They had spent time together, gotten closer, and yet there was still a sense of unease between them. Finally, Liam broke the silence. "Emma, I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know I've been distant, and I know I've been trying to protect myself. But the truth is, I don't want to let you go. I don't want to hide what's between us anymore." Emma looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never expected Liam to be so open, so vulnerable. He was always the confident CEO, the man who controlled everything around him. But in this moment, he wasn't that man. He was just Liam, and she realized that she wasn't afraid of him anymore. She wasn't afraid of what might happen between them. She was afraid of losing him. "I don't want to hide either," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "But we have to face the reality of what this means. We can't keep pretending that everything is fine when we both know it's not." Liam nodded, his expression softening. "I know, but I think we've both spent enough time pretending. I think we owe it to ourselves to be honest with each other. And to take this for what it really is, not what we've been telling ourselves it is." Emma swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. She had never been one to take risks, but something about this felt right. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her decisions anymore. She was ready to take a leap of faith. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "No more pretending. Let's figure this out together." The moment the words left her mouth, a wave of relief washed over her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with Liam. The days that followed were filled with more honesty and vulnerability than they had both anticipated. Liam and Emma began to face the challenges of their relationship head-on, no longer hiding behind the pretense of a fake engagement. It wasn't easy, but every conversation, every moment of truth, brought them closer together. They began to let their guards down, allowing themselves to experience the depth of their connection. As they spent more time together, the world around them seemed to fade away. The pressures of the media, the expectations of their friends and colleagues, it all felt less important. What mattered now was them, the connection they had forged, their shared moments of laughter and quiet understanding. Emma realized that she wasn't just falling for the man who had hired her for a job. She was falling for the man who had shown her kindness, patience, and understanding. The man who had listened to her when no one else had. Liam, too, had come to understand something he had never allowed himself to feel before. He had spent so much of his life building walls to protect himself from getting hurt, from the people who only saw him for his wealth and status. But Emma had seen through those walls. She had made him feel something real. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what that meant. He wasn't afraid of letting someone in. As the days turned into weeks, the two of them continued to grow closer, their bond becoming stronger with each passing day. They no longer worried about the future or what others might think. They were building something real, something that didn't need to be hidden anymore. And for the first time, Emma and Liam both knew that they had found something worth fighting for. As the weeks went by, Liam and Emma found themselves in a place they had never expected. Their relationship had evolved from a mere arrangement to something deeper, something real. Neither of them could deny it anymore. They had fallen for each other, and though they both had their fears, they were ready to face them together. It wasn't easy. There were still the pressures of the public eye, the constant scrutiny of Liam's life as a CEO, and Emma's own fear of being overwhelmed. But through it all, they had something that neither of them had ever truly experienced before, a genuine connection. One evening, as the city lights flickered below them from the penthouse balcony, Liam and Emma found themselves standing together, side by side, their fingers intertwined. It had been a long road to get here, full of twists and turns, but now, it felt like everything had fallen into place. "You know," Liam said softly, breaking the silence between them, "I never thought this would be my life." Emma turned to look at him, the smile that formed on her face a mixture of affection and understanding. "I didn't either," she replied, her voice full of warmth. "But I'm glad it is." She squeezed his hand, and in that moment, she knew that she wasn't just saying the words. She truly meant them. Over the last few weeks, they had shared more than just moments of intimacy. They had shared their vulnerabilities, their dreams, and their fears. They had become partners, not just in a relationship, but in life. It wasn't about the fake engagement anymore. It wasn't about public appearances or what anyone else thought. It was about them. And that was enough. "I never thought I'd let anyone in like this," Liam continued, his voice almost a whisper. "But with you, it feels different. You've made me feel things I didn't know I could feel again." Emma smiled, her eyes meeting his, her heart fluttering in her chest. "I feel the same way," she said. "I was always afraid of getting hurt, afraid of letting someone in. But with you, it's been worth it." They stood there for a moment, just taking in the silence, enjoying the peace that had come from knowing they had found something real. For the first time in a long while, neither of them felt the weight of the world bearing down on them. They didn't have to pretend anymore. What they had built together was real. The next day, Emma and Liam woke up to a new reality. They had decided that it was time to take the next step. No more hiding. No more pretending. They were ready to face the world together, as a couple. They knew there would be challenges ahead, especially in Liam's high-profile life as a CEO. But they also knew they were strong enough to face whatever came their way. Liam had arranged a quiet evening to make the announcement to their close friends and family. As they sat together, surrounded by the people they cared about, Liam took Emma's hand in his gaze meeting hers with a soft smile. "I know that everything between us started in an unconventional way," he said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "But what I've come to realize is that the most important things in life are the ones we don't plan for. Emma has been the best thing to ever happen to me, and I want to spend the rest of my life with her." The room fell into a stunned silence before everyone erupted into applause. Emma's heart swelled with emotion, her eyes welling with tears. She had never imagined her life would turn out this way, but here she was, surrounded by love and support. And it was real. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. As the evening went on, the laughter and joy in the room felt like a celebration of everything they had overcome together. Emma and Liam danced in the center of the room, their hands tightly clasped, their hearts in sync. It wasn't just about a fake engagement anymore. It was about love, true love, the kind that transcended appearances, that went beyond the surface, and went deep into the soul. As the night drew to a close, Emma and Liam stood by the window, looking out at the city below. The lights glittered like stars, and for the first time, Emma felt like she had everything she needed right in front of her. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Liam wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "We're just getting started," he said softly, kissing the top of her head. And in that moment, they both knew that no matter what the future held, they had found something worth fighting for. something real. As they stood there, holding each other, Emma realized that she wasn't just living a dream. She was living her life. And that life, with Liam by her side, was more than she could have ever hoped for. Discover the captivating journey in these millionaire stories, where unexpected twists lead to a deeper connection. In this narrative, a quiet woman unexpectedly becomes the center of attention as she embarks on a fake engagement with a powerful CEO. As the story unfolds, their relationship transitions from a staged act to a genuine bond, challenging everything they once knew about love, vulnerability, and personal connections. These millionaire stories capture the emotional transformation of two people who, despite the pressures of the public eye and personal insecurities, find solace in each other's company. The lines between real and fake blur as they navigate their feelings, learning that true connections are built on honesty, not appearances. Watch as the couple faces the inevitable complications of their growing emotions while trying to maintain their carefully constructed public lives. Through moments of vulnerability, misunderstandings, and breakthroughs, these millionaire stories explore how sometimes love is found in the most unexpected places. As their relationship evolves, the couple learns that true happiness isn't about the wealth or status they have, but the love and trust they build together. Follow along as they take their first steps into a new chapter where love and authenticity are no longer hidden behind a mask. Don't miss this emotional roller coaster and experience the magic of these millionaire stories that prove love can change even the most guarded hearts.